Hi, so my name is Sharanya, and I'm the English editor for bakamoono.lk. I'll get into what and how Bakamoono works, but they mentioned that I was a program manager at Grassrooted. So Grassrooted is one of the forces behind Bakamoono. We started about 8-9 years ago, and what we are is, well, our background is in HIV activism. But as time has evolved and as time has gone on, we've also moved broadly into the gender space. So a lot of gender-based violence, looking at sexual harassment in the workplace, we work with a lot of corporates, and just broadly looking at the gender space as a whole. So Bakamoono was born about 2 years ago. The idea came up about April 2016, when we realized that there wasn't really anything that looked at HIV in Sri Lanka and provided information for HIV in Sri Lanka in English, Sinhala, or Tamil. You can go to the Health Ministry's website, NSFCP, they have information, but there was nothing that really talked about stigma, about discrimination, that talked about, can I have children when I have HIV? Should I tell my partners? Should I be discriminated in the workplace? So that's kind of where Bakamoono started with Positive Hopes Alliance and a few other partners. But it was around June 2016 when we realized that there was a lot more information that we needed to put out there. And it's a bizarre space for me to be in right now because we're not digital. We're not W News, we're not digital marketers, we're rights-based people working in the rights-based space. But we realized very quickly that online was the best place for us to go. It's where the conversation needed to happen, and it ties in with a lot of what, sort of the understanding we had of how people were getting their information. So Bakamoono decided to explore. And when we explored, we realized that there was no information on anatomy, for example. There was very little to major information on laws against sexual harassment. And we realized there was a lot of information we needed to develop. So this came up, and it's in English, Sinhala, and Tamil. There was an interesting point that Yehan made, which talked about creating content separately for English and separately for Sinhala. And this is what we do with all 3 languages. I do the English editing. We have Papa Deshapriya, who does the Sinhala, and we have Dharani Priscilla, who does Tamil. Why different things in all 3 languages? It's because the language that is used and the understanding of what is happening in all 3 languages is different. The kind of language, the kind of words, the kind of conversation that's happening in the Sinhala language space is very different to what's happening in Tamil. So if you look at popular content, for example, South Indian movie stars are big, images from South Indian movies are big. Not so much, you won't see that in the Sinhala space. You'll see a very different kind of popular culture. Same thing with the English. What happens in popular culture doesn't necessarily translate. It's also important for us, and what we realized very quickly on, is that translation doesn't happen when it comes to colloquial conversations. And gender is a lot about colloquial conversations. It's a lot about the words that we use, it's a lot about the phrases that we have, and it's about the attitudes. That doesn't translate. You can't put on a direct translation, and that doesn't really work. So when we started moving into this space, we did do videos, and we still continue to do videos. We had Yehan in a video with a group of 3 to 5-year-olds talking about good touch, bad touch. And videos continue to be a popular form of content. But we got stuck very quickly because Bakamoono was about providing sensible, factual information. Now, you don't work in a space like rights and not have feelings and emotions and opinions. And we realized we were getting blocked because all we could do was put out facts. All we could do was put out sensible, realistic, factual information about a lived Sri Lankan reality. Now, this became problematic because we're all fairly passionate and opinionated people. So how could we capture emotion in these conversations? How do we capture the emotion of current conversations? How do we capture the sort of opinions that people were talking about? It wasn't being captured in the content. So very quickly, we thought, okay, let's look at image-based. So we started with buck cartoons, and we call them What a Hoot, and we have different cartoonists. So we started with the cartoons, and they picked up very quickly. So we come from a background of sexual and reproductive health and rights. So we were able to put in information, and we were able to make it funny, and we were able to do it in languages that people understood. Then we thought, hold on, memes are a conversation. Now it's interesting when I see all of you nodding and when I say memes, because usually I speak to parents, and usually I speak to corporates and Rotary clubs, and I have to ask them, do you know what a meme is? Then they look back at me. And then there's this whole conversation about what a meme is. But in this space, it's very clear understanding of what a meme is. So we thought, all right, let's have a look at what gender memes are out there. What's capturing the gender conversation? And we realized there wasn't too much in terms of Sri Lankan content, in terms of local content. There was a lot of funny stuff that comes up with things like BuzzFeed. BuzzFeed India had a lot of cool stuff. But where was the stuff that showed us Sri Lankan women, that showed us Sri Lankan conversations? So we started working on some memes. And these went viral very quickly. And viral is not something we particularly aspire to do in the rights based sector. But we found that people responded to this. People were linking to us. They were saying, this is really interesting. Where is this coming from? So we kept going. And we kept looking for more and more content that we could keep creating. We found that with memes, we were able to be clever, and we were also able to have an opinion. People like sharing memes more than they like sharing large articles. Then, it was in June of 2016 that we first came across what we now call cyber exploitation and violence, which is really in its crudest form the exchange of nudes between young people, sometimes older people in relationships, and those nudes are then used to blackmail one or more of the parties. We started working on that, and we found that there was a whole plethora of conversations that people were responding to as we created these memes and as we created these cartoons. We tried to stay topical with the memes. There were conversations that were happening globally that we found we could pick up on very quickly. We found that Sinhala and Tamil memes were being responded to hugely. People really, really wanted to see local content. We found that we were able to avoid issues of copyright by using cartoons and by reproducing what we saw online. And of course, we found we were able to actually put out facts that people would read, and then go searching for more information on. Because it was a snapshot, it's quick, it's easy to read. Then as we kept going, we found that we were also able to address stereotypes through memes. What kind of stereotypes can we get through to? How do we have conversations with people through a single image? This is an example of what we used in popular culture, in Tamil culture. Popular film stars, popular imagery. We found that we were able to avoid telling people what to think, and instead giving them maybe a suggestion of what they should be thinking about. Again, staying topical was very helpful. Now, it was interesting that for a group that works on cyber exploitation and violence, each of us received the Sanat video about 4 times, all with the hash, just so you know. This helped with that conversation. We find that also with memes, we're forced to stay very current. Because the conversation around is changing all the time. We find that there are things we can talk about without having to actually worry about who's reading them. A new format we've started exploring in the last 3 to 4 months is what we call the IO quotes, because you won't believe the things people say. And it has to be documented, we find, somewhere, somehow. So we continue to use these quotes, and we found that the IO quotes became interesting because we'd have people calling us up and saying, I think I said that, and I think you put it in your meme. So we're listening all the time. There are interesting mentalities that come out because people tell us often when we go to deal with parents and teachers, they say, surely people don't think like that. Surely they don't say that. They do. All of our IO quotes are quoted directly. We don't change a single word. We also found that with our memes, we were able to attract a much younger audience. So bakamoono is for 16 and above because of the nature of its content, and we don't feel that anybody younger than 16 should view any of the content on the website without any supervision. But we found that the memes, we were able to be a little bit cleaner, a little bit less risque. But we also found that we were able through that to talk to a much younger audience, an audience who wouldn't respond to long articles, who didn't understand words like patriarchy, who struggled maybe with concepts that we throw around so easily. And then we also found very quickly that we were able to document conversations. We were able, in one single image, remind ourselves of how ridiculous we can be. There were conversations that other people didn't want to touch. There were conversations that we were able to communicate our frustrations with how people responded to issues. And we also found that people were able to verbalize and sort of understand what they wanted to say through these memes, and they would use those memes to share it. This, in fact, has to date been our second most popular meme. So now what Bakamoono does is that we try to produce memes as often as we can. We're a really small team. We don't get paid as much as we could to sit and produce memes all day. But we continue to try and create the content we engage with. So what we focus on now is what we call comprehensive relationship education. So education that moves beyond 1 + 1 = 2. Education that also moves beyond just robotic sex education. If any of you pick up a textbook from the local health and physical science curriculum, you'll find that it's actually a really, really good syllabus. This is the problem. The problem lies in the teaching. And we find that teachers are uncomfortable, unhappy, and really don't want to teach it. We also find that the problem lies also a little higher sometimes, higher than we'd care to admit. So we've been pushing for relationship education, which also talks about consent, respect, respect for self, respect for difference, respect for the other, and we continue to try and do this. The point also I wanted to make today was that what we found very interesting about the usage of memes is that people who generally don't engage with a right space, who maybe find us boring or who find us a bit too serious and a bit too difficult to deal with and a bit too difficult to have those challenging conversations, we found the memes really help start up those conversations. We found that people respond very well to images. People respond well to videos, but it's difficult for us to be emotional in those videos. Whereas with the cartoons, with IO quotes, and with the memes, we're really much faster able to get people out of perhaps the notions that they had and make them laugh sometimes make them sigh, but very quickly people engaged with us a lot more. So that's where we're at. This is really badly formatted, but we are so far where we've been really great with Facebook. We're trying with Instagram. Twitter's not been so bad. Engagement on Twitter has been quite high. And we are moving slowly into the digital space because we are finding that the audience that we are trying to reach, which is young people, people who want to have these conversations, are more and more in the online space. And we need to start speaking the language that they speak. They don't speak chunks of text. They speak content. They speak memes. They speak pictures. They speak images. They speak quotes. They speak videos. And so that's where we're at right now. So I'm going to stop there, and if there are any questions.
Any questions, guys?
I agree with almost everything. It was perfect, except for the alcohol ban, which I think is good, because it should be banned for men as well. Because, you know, you could have an amazing body, and if you're running it with alcohol, you're like, it's bad.
So
amazing.
I'm going to give you Bakamoono's stance, because I'm here to speak on behalf of Bakamoono. So our problem with the alcohol ban is not so much whether people are drinking alcohol or not. We find that it's just based on pure discrimination. We had a health minister who was sophisticated enough to come up with a taxation policy for sugar, because diabetes is very high in Sri Lanka. They rolled out a massive plan that involved labeling on all of the all of the drinks, taxing the sugar industry, taxing the beverage industry to drive down sugar consumption, which would then drive down diabetes. So my question, and our question, I guess, is if we can apply that level of sophistication of policy making to diabetes, then why is it that on alcohol, our solution is to ban it? Because we found that banning never solves anything. It doesn't solve anything. And moreover, if you were going to ban it outright, that would have been fine. That would have been the decision of the government to make. It was the discriminatory nature of the ban and the selective nature of who they banned that we had a problem with.
If you did not ban it, like girls, like women, they used to have children and all, right? Like women are responsible for motherhood and all. So it's possible that with too much alcohol consumption, the children could be affected as well.
Sure, yeah, but it's up for adult women with the consultation of their doctors to make, not for government to make arbitrary decisions.
Yeah, the government shouldn't make arbitrary.
So that's our problem. Our problem is with the arbitrary nature of the decision. All of the thought process that you're having, I promise you, none of them had. And that's our problem, because there was no thought process to that.
I understand. Thank you.
All right, anyone else? Okay, thanks a lot, Sharanya.